Hey guys, Kaz here, and today I am finally doing my best and worst of 2020. Yes, it's been a while since 2020. Everybody else has got this video out, but hey, if you're missing them, here's another one. So, I'm not doing individual videos. I've got 5 of one, 5 of the other. We're going to do it like bad, good, bad, good, bad, good. I've done it like this before, so it works. Let's just crack on. First of all, on the bad side, or the most disappointing, or the most not good, I have Invincible Volume 1. This is about a guy who has superhero parents. He doesn't have any powers manifested and he's trying to figure that out. And then he gets some, and it was just kind of meh. It wasn't terrible, it wasn't bad, but it was very meh. It was very painted by numbers. There was nothing new about the superhero genre here. It just felt very samey. It felt very tropey. There was the popular girl at school, and then also she's a secret superhero, and then they get together in a superhero fighting crime gang, and it just felt like anything you've ever heard of superheroes before. And the story wasn't very developed. In trade paperbacks, they always have a little bit at the back where it has some behind the scenes or concept work, and in there the creator of this literally said, oh yeah, we made this alien race and we didn't even bother giving them a name. And that just about sums this up. They made bad guys, they didn't even bother giving them names because there was no storyline there. They were there, they defeated them, and then they weren't there anymore. If you can't even be asked to give your superheroes a proper baddie to fight, then it's not great. That was the artwork. It was quite nice to look at, but didn't really have any substance. So now let's jump over to the best side. And one of the first books I read in 2020 in January was Noughts and Crosses by Mallory Blackman. I know, I'm behind, but this book was so good. It was so the opposite of everything I just said. This was just exciting and interesting, and wherever I expected it to go somewhere, it went completely differently. The tropes I expected it to take, it just flipped them on the head or threw the book away completely. And it was just so good to read something that was different. And even though this is quite an old book, it still felt fresh and new, and the ideas were new. And like I said, it wasn't full of tropes that I was expecting this book to take. Everything went a different way, twists and turns. It was just really, really interesting. And if you don't know, this book is basically set in a world where the sort of hierarchy of race is the opposite of in our world. So black people are the ones that have all the power, white people are the ones that are seen as second-class citizens, and it's about the white people trying to rise up and get power and get equal rights and all that jazz. And then also on the flip side, it's about this relationship between a black girl and a white boy. But again, it just takes so many twists and turns that I just would not expect in from a YA book as well. This is why I expected all the YA tropes, and it just wasn't there, and I loved that. It had politics, it had familial relationships, it had all the good stuff, and yes, great book. Next up on the mess side was The Illusion by DJ Cooper. This is going to be a bit of a theme where I don't really own many of the books on this side. This was a short novella that was set in the Bulwark world. So there's this series about a place called Bulwark, and then loads of different authors did a little short story novella type thing, and then it was a collection, all these different people in that same world. And this one just felt short for me. The writing wasn't very good. I didn't really enjoy the writing. The storyline felt really slow and kind of boring, and the characters didn't really have much development. It's been a while since I read it, and I did write a proper review on Goodreads, so if you want my actual thoughts, they're there. But from what I remember, just it was hard to follow. For example, the characters would be called their first name, their full name, doctor or police, I think one of them were. So it just was hard to remember who was talking and who was who, because they were all known by different names, and it's like a really short, thin novella. It got kind of weird and creepy towards the end, and I was like, oh wow, this is a kind of a cool concept, but the rest of the book just wasn't there for me to enjoy it, just because the end was sort of something I wasn't expecting. So yeah, the writing wasn't great. I can't even remember. I know there were specific things I didn't like. I'm going to actually go on my Goodreads review of it because it's annoying me that I can't remember what it was. Right, so it seems like I was annoyed because stuff was overwritten and there was too specific. He pulled his jacket clothes around him, he thrust his hands in his pockets, finding his Bluetooth earphones, he threw the connecting wire behind his head, twisting the buds into his ears. It just was too many words. It's a novella, we don't need you to explain how to put headphones in. Get to the point. there's not enough time and space for you to be overwriting it this much. Yes, that was a thing that annoyed me, I remember. He pulled the earbuds out and retrieved his phone. He stopped it in the middle of the 17th song on his playlist. It was running straight through the list with shuffle deactivated. He'd only been walking for 5 minutes, 10 at most, 17 songs. He had no recollection of how he got there. The only indication of how long it had taken were the number of tracks he had apparently listened to on his phone. What? Don't write that much. It was crazy. Right, I'm going to stop now. I remember why it was annoying. That was why. Here's another. These are lines that I included in my Goodreads review, so that's why it's easy for me to find. Another one that I've highlighted is, there was something about him in this town he had recently moved to that didn't gel. It just clunky. Moving on. On the good side, we have The Amethyst Panda by Kay MacLeod. This is book 2 in the Mayamon series, and also is written by my sister. That's not why it's on here. It's on here because it's a really good book. And basically the first book, and this obviously as well, is set in a world where Mayamon exist. It's kind of like Pokemon, Digimon, that sort of thing. They were brought to real life by a company. People were playing the game. They got bored. They just let them all go into the wild. And then they were breeding. They've become this nuisance on life and civilization. And people go around trying to capture them and stop them breaking cities and doing bad stuff and all that jazz. And one of the things I loved about this book specifically, obviously I love the first one as well, but this book talks so much about mental health and the aftermath of really bad things happening, and you never see that in fantasy, especially like YA fantasy. It's just not something that is spoken about. People go through really traumatic experiences and then it's just like, hey ho, that was fine, move on to the next thing. But in here, we're in Sam's head a lot. She's thinking about certain things that have happened. She's upset about them. It shows in her mood, in how she reacts to other people, in what she does days to day. And that is something I really, really enjoyed reading in here. Just, I mean, mental health in fantasy obviously is going to be a big thing because crazy shit happens. So definitely pick this up. It's also on Audible. Well, this one isn't yet, but it will be soon. But check out the first one. Plug, plug, plug. Next, on the not so great side, we have Sprint Dreams by Faith Dismuke. This was an author who had just released their book and they were asking people on Goodreads, I think, if they wanted to review the book. So I did. I said, hey, I will review it. It sounds interesting. Unfortunately, it just didn't work for what I was hoping to find in it. It was about a black girl who does running in college, I think it was, or university, college because it was American. And she's bisexual, and then there's a relationship, and there's all these different things going on. And that was the thing that didn't work. All these different things going on. In this book, there was just too many different things that were trying to be explored, and none of them got enough page time, so it just, all of them felt flat. So for example, at one point she's talking about a neighbour and her seeing this shooting of a kid she knows, but then nothing really came from that. At one point she's talking about a girl at the college who had been date raped, and then nothing really came of that. There's just all these little things that were talked about, but it's like trying to include too many topics to the point where none of them worked, which is unfortunate. If they just picked one or two, it would have worked a lot better, but trying to have all these different things in one small book, it just didn't work. I also wasn't a massive fan of the relationship. It was very toxic, which is fine. It's fine to have books about toxic relationships, but there was nowhere in the synopsis that said who this girl that she liked is going to be. And it turned out it was her coach, and then her coach was an absolute dickhead, but also she was in a relationship with her, and then obviously there was them power play and the power differences, and the ending, while probably quite realistic, it just didn't sit well with me the way it was wrapped up. And yeah, it just, unfortunately, trying to include too many things into one book just didn't work. 5 down, we are halfway through, and you know what that means. It's time for a message from one of our sponsors, and then I'll be back chatting the same old shit. Hey! You having fun? Next, on the best side, we have A Good Girl's Guide to Murder by Holly Jackson. This is the first book in... Is it a duology? Is there going to be more? I don't know. But it's a YA mystery where a girl sets out to figure out who did this murder. Is it the person that the police blamed, or is it somebody different? This was just really, really interesting and fun and enjoyable to read. keeps you guessing the whole time. I didn't figure out who it was, although to be fair, I'm not the sort of person that goes into a book or a TV show purposefully trying to figure out who it was. Go with the flow, enjoy the book, and have fun with it, and that is what I had with this book. It was interesting, I enjoyed all the characters, I enjoyed the whole mystery aspect and all these different things coming together, the way that they found out the clues and stuff. In here it's written, so you'll have emails and text messages and different things like that, a little bit multimedia, not loads, but a little bit here and there, just to sort of round out the story and show you how they finding out all these things. And yeah, it was a very, very good time. The only thing I didn't like is something that I don't like in a lot of books, and I even made a video about it, so I'll link that above and below. Books that didn't need a romance plot in them. Just saying. Next we'll go over to the not so great disappointing side, and that is The Gravity of Us by Phil Stamper. This one I read on my library's BorrowBox app, so read it there. It was something that I'd seen around and I thought, oh, that looks interesting, but then unfortunately for me personally, it wasn't. I feel like it reads too much like somebody that just really likes space and travel and all that sort of NASA sort of stuff, trying to put that into a fiction book, when just write a non-fiction or write a speculative fiction of here's what I think would happen if we went to Mars, rather than let me wrap this up into a YA book with all these other aspects. It just felt kind of boring, long-winded, too much was talked about on that side of the things, not enough was developed on the character side of things. The main character didn't really have much of a personality. He liked cassettes and he was an influencer. That was the lot. I also didn't enjoy the romance. I thought it was very insta-lovey. Neither of the characters knew anything about each other. I feel like they didn't even talk, they didn't even have a friendship blossom. They just, oh, I like him, he likes me, now let's get together. But then also always have little things happening that makes us question whether we should be together, or it was just not good in my opinion. I'm glad I read it on my library, that I didn't buy the book. Yeah, there was a supposed best friend that was back in the place that he used to live. Then they moved to the camp where they're learning all the space stuff, and then he just never talked to her again. Just stuff like that. It feels like the characterization wasn't there, but then all of the space travel, all that stuff, that was in abundance. So it just felt, the levels weren't right there for me personally. I very much enjoy characters, and this one just didn't have characters that were good enough. Next up on the good side, Darius the Great is Not Okay by Adi Coram. This is the exact opposite. The characters in here are perfection. I loved this book so much. I loved all the culture. It's about Darius, who goes to visit his grandparents in Iran. He's never been before, but his grandparent is ill, so they go over there and stay for quite a while. And I really enjoy reading a book and being able to Google stuff. Maybe that's weird for other people, maybe they like to just stay in the book, but I very much enjoy it if I read about a different culture or different foods or art. If a character goes to a gallery, I love to Google the artwork, and then that fits into the whole way that I'm perceiving the book, because I'm like, right, now I know what they're looking at, now I know what they're eating, now I know where they're going. I love that. And in here it was in abundance, because obviously I don't know a lot about Persian culture, so it was just really, really interesting. And then obviously the characters, like I said, Darius, great character. His family, the family dynamic with his parents and his sister, his grandparents, I just loved all of the characters, all the ways they interacted. It felt very real, because certain people you're closer to, certain people you feel a bit of distance and you don't know why that's there. And then both his grandparents have different ways that they show their love to him, and it's just very real and great. And then obviously the friendship with Sarab was just wonderful to see. I love to see a strong masculine friendship, because it's something that you don't see a lot of, or maybe you do, maybe I'm just reading the wrong books, but it's either like you see friends, groups of friends, or obviously in an LGBT book you see two guys, friends, and then falling for each other. But two male people in a friendship that's that close and that emotional, you don't see very often. I think it's one of the reasons I love Andrew Smithy, because he writes male friendships really well. And in here, I just love the friendship between Darius and Sorab. So yeah, absolutely brilliant book. And then last on the worst / disappointing / not the best side is probably the book that I was most disappointed in. Not because it was the worst book I read necessarily, but because I expected to like it so much more. And that is The Electric Air by Victoria Lee. I really enjoyed the first book in this duology, which is The Fever King. It's just have all this stuff, it's sci-fi, there's this illness that goes around called magic, it either kills you or you have powers when you get better. And the whole magic system was really cool, the whole politics was really interesting, everything was really great, the characters were good. And then this one, it kind of stripped away all of that and it went in a completely different direction that I just didn't want for this series. Here's the thing, this book is about a toxic relationship and how that affects all the different people. Right, that's fine. If this book wasn't the sequel to The Fever King, I probably would have enjoyed it a bit more. If it was tweaked a bit and it didn't have them characters and it was different characters, I think it would have been a really interesting look into that whole aspect. But because it was the sequel to The Fever King, it didn't work for me because all of the magic system and all the powers just got thrown to the wayside. All the characters changed pretty much everything about them. It just didn't seem like the same people. Any new characters that were brought in were just like Deus Ex Machina to be able to do something later on, or there was these two girls that come back with one of the characters and then you never see them unless you need them for something. Like for example, at one point they needed to get into Texas and then it's like, oh well, character A or character B, whichever one it is from Texas, so that's how we'll do it. And it just felt like there was no characterization there. And you know what I just said, I very much enjoy characters and it just didn't feel like either of them two girls had a character. They were both the same person, but two of them, but nothing. And then older characters, like the secondary characters from the first book, just either weren't around or again were just thrown in for no reason at the end. At the end of this book, the big finale, something's happening. One character that I swear we haven't seen for the whole of this book just turns up like, oh hey, it's me, Jimmy from book 1. I can't remember what his name was. What are you guys doing? And then they were like, oh, we're doing this, so if you do that, then that'll be good. And then he's the whole reason that the ending works. And I'm like, you can't just ignore all of your characters and then use them to be able to fix a situation, because it just seems too coincidental, too easy. I didn't like it. Like I said, I think too much time was taken with the whole power dynamic, toxic relationship thing. It just felt very repetitive. And then like the first half of this book was that, and then in the same chapter it was going on to that, and then the next paragraph, not even a new chapter, the next paragraph after that, it was like 2 days later in a different place and then invaded it. The pacing was very much not good in this book. The first half was too slow, and then when they did kick off, it was two days later in the middle of a war, not even the start of a new chapter. What? That's not how you pace a book. So yeah, very disappointed in this book. I will still check out Victoria Lee's work in the future, because like I said, if the sort of toxic relationship aspect of this book was put in a different book and had its own thing where the politics and the magic system and the characters we already knew didn't need to be there because it wasn't a sequel, I feel like this book would have worked a lot better. So I'll definitely keep an eye out on their other books, and hopefully I will like them as much as The Fever King instead of dislike them as much as The Electric Air. And then last but not least, on the good, great, best of side, Girl Made of Stars by Ashley Herring Blake. So the best of side, I don't really have it in some sort of order. I feel like the worst of side, I had it in a little bit of a disappointing order. This side, I just loved all of the books. Well, this book was definitely very emotional for me. I cried about 20 million times. That's a bit of an exaggeration, but me saying I cried about 10 times probably isn't an exaggeration, because damn. I made the mistake of reading this book on a bus. Yes, it was at the beginning of 2020 because buses existed, and I read this coming home from the first and only gig I went to in 2020, and I cried about 5 times in a 40-minute bus journey home. Luckily it was at 11 o'clock at night, so there weren't many people around to see me do it, but yes, very emotional. This book is about a girl who is coming to terms with the fact that her twin brother has been accused of rape and she believes the girl. And it's just so heart-wrenching and emotional, and this is what I love in contemporary. I'm a stickler for harrowing shit, and this is harrowing. Yes. I just loved this book so much. It was so poignant, trying to see this girl going through all these emotions, trying to come to terms with this. Somebody that she absolutely loves that is part of her, because they were twins. They're not just brother and sister, they are twins. They came from, like, they lived in the belly at the same time. And all these emotions and these feelings and these thoughts and just everything about this book is so emotional and raw and interesting and great and harrowing and brilliantly done. And I cried a lot. So yeah, obviously one of the best books of 2020. So there we go. Those were the best and least best books I read in 2020. The video is finally here. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe some of the books that I talked about, you'll think, hey, that sounds good. Maybe you think, hey, that book that was in your least favourite side, I loved that book. That's great. Let me know down below why. Obviously, people see things differently, and it's totally cool. So yeah, say some words down below, I will reply. And if this is your first video by me and you enjoy it, then please check out some of the others. And if you continue to enjoy it, then please subscribe, that'd be awesome. Anyway guys, I'll see you in a few days with another video. Bye.